Good evening. My name is Steve Miller. I'm on the board of LivableStreets Alliance, and I want to start by welcoming you with a couple of announcements. First, we are having the proceedings videotaped, so during the question and answer, if you do not want yourself to appear on that film, please indicate it when you're called on, and we won't photograph you. If there's some other reason that you want to make sure you're erased from every possible film, please talk to us afterwards, and I'm not quite sure, but we'll try. If everybody could take 1 second to put your cell phones on mute. And while you're doing that, it's a moment of quiet, and I think we should actually do it formally for the people, in memory of the people who were hurt or killed this last weekend, this last week on the streets of our city. Thank you. So LivableStreets is an organization. We've been around for 7 years. We advocate for better bicycling and walking and transit, creating safe streets and vibrant communities. It's about using transportation as a tool to make the city a better place to live, play, work, raise families, and for some of us to grow up. This is the 5th year, amazingly enough, that we have hosted the Boston Bicycle annual report back to the community. And it's pretty amazing to have gotten this far. It's sort of an appropriate milestone moment to think about what's been accomplished and some of the very big challenges facing us as we go through some transitions in the future. But first it's important, we've got to start with the thank yous, and they're really appropriate. I want to start by thanking the LivableStreets staff, Jackie Douglas and Carol Oberg. Are you guys around? Raise your hand. Okay, there they go. And you know that they don't do it alone. We have dozens and dozens, and sometimes it seems like hundreds of volunteers who help here tonight and at our other activities. It's a big crew, so we thank them with a round of applause. All of you who are members, it's your support that makes all this possible, pays them the big bucks. It's a big deal. We really appreciate it. But it keeps the office open and makes the kind of work we do possible. So thank you. And thanks to all of you for being here. It's your participation with LivableStreets, as individuals, with other groups, that really makes the difference. We're also really honored to have a number of elected officials here tonight. And I wonder, so I don't get in trouble by missing somebody, if you're an elected official, could you raise your hand? Say hello? Okay, could you say hello and introduce yourself, please.
Hello, Mike Ross, on view with you. Thank you for all you're doing.
Bill?
I'm Felix Royal, City Council Vice Candidate for Mayor. Grateful to be here.
And I think a couple of other city councilors have sent staff. Yana's here, and if she's not her staff person, James Sutherland's here. Anybody else I don't want to miss? Well, thank you all for coming. And of course, I have to thank our sponsors, people who actually help put the financial stuff behind it. If you could raise your hands as I mentioned you, as you're here. Heart up. Ayana's present. You're pointing at something and I'm not sure what. Slide in advance. Double advance. Thank you. Thank you. So, sponsored by Tool Design. You guys here? Could you raise your hand? Nick Jackson, here over there. Jason and Fisher, law firm, over here. Thank you. Charles River Wheelman, Great Bike Club. And our event sponsor is Landry's Bicycle, and Jack Johnson, Mark Latour. You guys here? Now they're out riding somewhere. Okay. It's a little overwhelming. Okay. I also want to make sure we acknowledge the other advocacy groups who are here today. LivableStreets, I believe in it, it's a great group, but we don't do it all alone either. So I know that there are people here from Walk Boston. Could you stand up? Or raise your hand? Thank you. NASBIKE. I thought David Watson's here. The Boston Cycling Union. I think I saw Pete. It's also important to remember this is about transportation. Bicycles run on the same streets that everybody else walks and drives. So we also have partners here from On the Move. People from On the Move here? Okay. And Transportation for Massachusetts, our partner who's been pushing for better financing. You know they're good guys. Okay, thanks. So when LivableStreets started 7 years ago, there was no paid staff, but there was a legion of eager volunteers and people really wanting to make a difference. But you may remember back then, Boston was pretty hostile to bicycling. Worse, there was very little cooperation among the walking, transit, disability, and cycling advocacy groups, not to mention a lack of connection or alliance with environmental or public health or parkland activists. And as some of you may recall, among the cyclists, the most vocal groups were those who opposed having accommodations on the streets at all. No bike lanes, much less cycle tracks. So we started LivableStreets in order to provide a way to bring people together, to create coalitions, to broaden the vision, the alliances, because we knew that if we fought each other, it became really easy for city and state officials to ignore us. But if we spoke together, and if we understood that what we're doing is not just about bikes or walking or buses or transit, it's about creating a city that people want to live in, that's prosperous and healthy. We can actually make it work. It's not the vehicles, it's not the modes, it's the people. So, I think we've come a long way. 7 years ago, LivableStreets started by first getting involved in getting the bike lanes on Commonwealth Ave. Some of you may remember they were the first. It was kind of bizarre. And instantly, within a year, the number of cyclists on that street started to go up. It was, if you build it, they come. We have worked with a bunch of partners. That's the design on the top for the BU Bridge. You may remember it was a small bridge. There was no possible way to have room for bicycle lanes until it turned out there was. And the bottom is a vision of Longfellow Bridge. Unfortunately, it won't be quite as good, but it's a lot better than it would have been without that broad alliance that brought people together and the state and the city's willingness to listen and work with us. Parking Day. LivableStreets actually got really into this one. This is where you take parking and you make it a park. So there's now, I think there's something like 15 or 17 of these set up every year. Jackie, what's the day this year? You here? Somebody know what the day? Jackie? Jackie Douglas. What day is parking day this year?
September.
In September. Stay tuned. That's close enough. Okay. With a bunch of other partners, we have worked on Circle the City, which is Boston's Open Streets, Open Parks event. We're going to have a huge party along up and down Huntington Ave on July 14th. We hope you come. And on Blue Hill Ave in September also. But we've also worked with people on the Mass Ave cycle tracks, or because we should be so lucky, and Mass Ave bike lanes, and on T for Massachusetts, trying to get better transportation and funding for the T and for the system as a whole. This is the cross sections for the Longfellow Bridge up on the top, Western Ave and River Street on the bottom. Through a united effort of advocacy, we have really transformed what's going to happen on the bridges across the Charles and in some cases across the state. without the kind of push we've been doing, this would have been just a quick repair job. There's a hole in the bridge, fix it. But because of involvement of all of you, because of, some of you may remember a first meeting we had at the Museum of Science around when DCR was first talking about Craigie Bridge, and people flooded the meeting and said, not good enough just to put it back the way it is. We've got a whole new system of transportation in the city, and this is what flows out of that. This is, on the left, is McGrath Highway, a huge community mobilization and victory with a lot of groups involved to ground McGrath and in the long run build connections between the neighborhoods that were once torn apart. Over on the right is in Charlestown, Rutherford Avenue, which again is going to be surfaced and become part of reknitting the community and bringing the kind of healthy activity that people there want. So we've really, together, changed the face of bicycling in Boston. We've not only changed the face, but we've changed the demographics. And I'm sure Nicole will talk a little bit about what the city has done, and I think a really good job about getting more people involved, not just the people who are young, male, and white, and wear spandex occasionally, but the rest of the population, old and young as well. We know we have a long way to go. You know, sometimes it feels like this is what we're up against, but we all know that pretty soon, and then maybe again, it's going to turn into this. So, but actually, it is this. This is the Longfellow Bridge on a normal workday morning. This is half of the line. The person who took the picture was halfway through the line. Okay, if we're having bike jams on the Longfellow Bridge as it currently exists, just imagine what's going to happen when we build it, and they come. The city is changing. We know, however, there's a long way to go. So we need to deal with safety. We need to deal with making our streets safer for pedestrians of all types, no matter how long it takes for them to get across the street. For people like Chris, who are in the wheelchairs. For people like the gentleman on the bottom left, who is feeling extremely nervous right now. We all know that the city, there's certain things you can do yourself, and the city deserves a lot of credit for beginning to change the climate. I'm sure, again, Nicole will talk some more about this, but Boston is becoming a national leader in putting side guards on the bottoms of its trucks. We hope we go further and start requiring it to be something that has to be on every truck. If you remember, virtually every person who's been killed by a vehicle, every bicyclist who's been killed by a vehicle in the last year and a half, was killed by getting thrown under the wheels. This is the way you prevent that. It's not fun to be hit by a car, but it's death. It's death to get thrown under the wheels of a truck. This is an important change. And the helmet machines. I think most of us who come here wear helmets. I think we should do our part in urging other people to be safe. We'll get into the laws later, but I think on an individual basis, it's really important that people do what they can. Some of you may know that I have a personal obsession with rear view mirrors and bright blinking lights. I think they're important as well. But we also know that the real answer is the infrastructure. It's changing the way that bicycles, pedestrians, cars, trucks interact, and that happens physically changing the nature of the roads. On the top is the cycle track on Western Ave in Boston. We hope there are many more of these around the city. On the left, bottom left, is the map of the Dudley Square, Malcolm X Boulevard redevelopment and redesign area. We hope the city is able to move forward on getting cycle tracks there. And we need a lot more of these bike boxes and other facilities to make a difference on the road. We need to build out the citywide bike network. We need to make every street bicycle safe. But we also need to be able to figure out what the real desire lines are and make sure those are doubly safe. So the fact that the city is creating a bike network plan is fabulous. Collectively, we have to make sure that it gets implemented. Not only the city streets, just like with a car, you have city streets, and then you have the major roads that connect those city streets to get you across the area, across the city. This is the Green Routes plans. This is a whole bunch of us have begun meeting. I'm going to, at some point, urge others to get involved. Coming up with a plan for creating a backbone network of low-stress off-road or cycle track corridors that allow for recreation and commuting, functional work, to get around the entire region, extending out into the suburbs. This particular map I want to give credit, is from Peter Firth's lab over in Northeastern. David Luttenheiser at MAPC has done a similar map. There's a bunch of these beginning to coalesce. I think we're going to start hearing about this in the next year. Hubway. Man, it's great. What we need to do, okay, you can applaud. Okay. We understand Hubway has to build from its strengths. It doesn't do any good to have one Hubway station in the middle of nowhere with nothing nearby. We hope collectively we can urge the city and the institutions around the city to help spread it to more neighborhoods in a coherent and helpful manner. But the biggest challenge facing us right now is the transitions that are about to happen, both at the city, at the mayoral level, the city council, and next year at the state level. Livable Streets is now beginning a process, working with a whole bunch of different groups, to come up with a progressive transportation platform and a survey for candidates. 10 questions. Would you, if you become mayor, agree to 10 questions? And then, once the primaries occur and the field is narrowed, so we can actually have a coherent conversation, we're going to host a forum, a transportation forum for the candidates. We really want to make this on the agenda so the progress we've had doesn't get lost. We move forward bicycle strong. So I'm now really excited about, well, one more thing. You know, none of this happens just because people wish it, right? Politics is an organized activity. It's a kind of a team sport. I hope you see the cards on your chair and you join Livable Streets. But actually, more important than that, you join somebody. Join a group. Become engaged. Become part of something. Again, I think you should join Livable Streets. But more important, get involved. Partly you're here, that's a big first step. But this doesn't happen on its own. Whatever you do, volunteer some time, give some money, raise your voice. And whatever you do, have fun. The best part about bicycling is the smile you feel as you're first taking off and you suddenly think, I've got 15, 20 minutes being on my bicycle before I get into work. So, thank you all for coming. And some of you may know that Nicole Friedman is actually Peter Pan. So you know Never Never Land, nobody grows up. So she's still in her 20s. But even in Never Never Land, occasionally something seeps through. And we have heard from this little Tinkerbell person that today is actually her birthday. So Nicole, I'm not allowed to light this inside. So this is a make-believe burning candle. And I wonder if you could come up and you could do a make-believe blowing out a wish on your make-believe candle. Ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Nicole. Happy birthday to you. My honor to pass the podium over to our Pixie, my friend, Nicole Friedman.
I'm so glad you guys are all here to celebrate my second 20th birthday with me. Plus one. Actually, I'm very excited to talk about coming here for the 5th annual State of the Hub. And I do want want to welcome our counselors, Counselor Mike Ross, Counselor Felix Arroyo, and Counselor Ayana Presley. Thank you all for being here in the audience and caring about cycling. So this is our 5th year, and I've ended each of our last talks with some of the worst cycling bike lanes from other cities. And I figure after 5 years, we probably have enough confidence to talk about some of our own mistakes tonight, so you will see some of those. They're not really in bike lane form. Keep in mind that mistakes are in other cities, but in Boston, it's lessons learned. A few of you might be surprised to see me here tonight. As many of you know, I left my position at the City of Boston and took a job up in Maine at Maine Hudson Trails. And it was kind of a surprising move for a lot of people. It was I moved up to a town that was 900 people. It was 32 miles from the nearest stop sign. And if any of you are interested, you can actually look it up online, type in Kingfield, Maine. You'll end up pressing the zoom out button about 4 times until you recognize something. The first thing you'll recognize is the North Pole. But really, when I got back, a lot of people called me up and they said, Nicole, so what's the scoop? What happened? Why didn't it work out? And I think they were a little bit disappointed with my answer, but I was really honest. And I said, look, I realized I love Boston and I love working for Boston Bikes, and I'm very glad to be back. And really, there's absolutely nothing else that caused me to come back. This was taken in July. Okay, so where have we come and how far have we come? We are now the 5th most bikeable city according to Walk Bike Score. I recently saw a ranking where we were ranked as high as number 2. That one was alphabetical. We've seen an 82% increase in ridership since the mayor started the program in 2007. That's according to the American Community Survey. That's nearly a doubling in ridership. And we now have about a 1.7% mode share. That's 1.7% of all trips, commute trips, are being made by bicycle. But we need to do much better. And the mayor has a climate action plan that was adopted in 2012. And as part of the climate action plan, the mayor states that in terms of bicycling, which fits right into that, we will see a 10% bike mode share in 2020. And actually, I did want to point out one thing here in this photo that I really like. This is 1.7%. You've got 4 people waiting in line, queued up at a stoplight. It's one of my favorite photos. What I really like about it is actually they are stopped at the stoplight. But this is where we need to go. This is 10% mode share, 2020, 5 times as many cyclists queued up at that stoplight. So then the question is, are we on track? And the answer is yes, and. Because we need to make some changes. So I looked at some of the top cycling cities, Portland, Seattle, DC, and Boston. And one thing I saw is the mode share increases linearly over time. And if we continue to increase linearly, we will be at 3% mode share in 2020. So what do we need to do? We need to start implementing ever more progressive bicycle facilities so that we can move that curve and get to 10%. So what have we done to date, and how are we going to get the 10% mode share? To date, we have added 62 miles of bike lane in the city of Boston. That's up from our 0. We've tackled the low-hanging fruit. We've added bike lanes. We've added share lane markings. And wherever possible, we tried to go beyond the basic bike lane, even within the realm of low-hanging fruit. So we added wider bike lanes when we could. We have green highlights on many of our bike lanes. To highlight a couple of the intersections. I wasn't sure if people would actually catch that. It reminds me of middle school, some mistakes. Downtown is now covered with bike lanes. We've got Kilby, High Street, Oliver Street, Framingham Street, Congress, Atlantic, Seaport. You can crisscross downtown entirely on bike lanes. And all of you know about Mass Ave, tremendous project by the mayor to remove 70 parking spots and make room for our bike lane. And as we go, we always want to include the most progressive facilities we can. We just added our first 2-stage left turns You'll see them on Huntington Avenue. When you're there, they're actually a lot more, less confusing than that one. And we have 77 bike boxes throughout the city, according to one intern that we sent out with the task of find every single bike box. It was a little strange. I called the intern. I said, this is a great intern. I want to make sure this intern comes back. And I called up and I got the voicemail and it said something to the effect of blah, blah, blah. And if this is Boston Bikes, there is no forwarding information about this number. I can't figure out why she didn't want to come back. Okay, but where do we need to go? We've heard loud and clear from our advocates that we want protected bike lanes, cycle tracks. And we know the number one reason that people don't bike is fear of motor vehicles and safety. For those of you that don't know what a cycle track is, usually in a standard bike lane, you have the sidewalk, followed by the parked car, next to the bike lane, next to the moving car. So you really have the cyclist sandwiched between the bike lane and the moving vehicles. And that makes a lot of people nervous. When you get to a cycle track, you're really flipping that. So you have your sidewalk, and then in this case, you actually have your bike lane, a bit of a buffer, and then you have your parked car or vertical element that provides a buffer before you get to your moving vehicles. So all of a sudden, a cyclist has a much freer path, and they are physically separated from the vehicles. So what do we know about protected bike lanes? This was one of my favorite survey questions that we did, and we had hundreds of cyclists take the survey, and we just showed photos. Just photos. We didn't say what they were or what they were, no words attached. And it was basically, how do you feel about riding in each of these situations? And what we found is the facility types that were shown that had the most separation, an off-road bike path, protected bike lane, these are the ones where people felt the most comfortable. And then you get to less and less protection, bike lane, shared lane, road without a bike lane, and people feel less and less comfortable. The thing that was interesting about this study, we broke it out by beginner, intermediate, and advanced cyclists, and the trend was similar for all of them. All levels of riders seem to prefer and feel more comfortable in the protected bicycle facilities. What else do we know about cycle tracks? They decrease the crash injury rate 20 to 28%, so I don't know that one offhand. And they increase ridership, sometimes 28 to 66%. Significant crash injury reduction and significant ridership increases. If we're going to get to 10%, we need facility types like this. There we go. I think the Prospect Park New York City cycle track is a fantastic example of a great cycle track. They put this one in. They saw ridership triple. 3 times as many riders between before and after when they put in this cycle track. And they saw the crash injury rate reduced 63%. That's tremendous for just adding a little bit of paint to the road. Even speeding went down. Before, there was 74% of the drivers were speeding, and afterwards, it was only 20% of the drivers were speeding. So where are we now? Where are we getting to? We have our demonstration cycle track. Thank you very much, Vinny, who's in the audience, who really spearheaded this, on Western Avenue, and we've learned a significant amount from this, and it will definitely guide us as we go forward with ever more cycle tracks. Many of you probably noticed in April of last year, we installed Seaport Boulevard, a buffered bike lane. The main difference between this and a cycle track is there's no parked cars, but that's okay. And then I think a project that I'm really proud of is Brookline Avenue. I don't know if any of you have gotten into the Longwood Medical area recently, but Charlotte Fleetwood spearheaded this project. We now have a bike lane on Brookline Avenue, and it includes a buffer in many spots. Brookline Avenue, in the heart of the Longwood Medical area, is an incredibly challenging area. You have ambulances, shuttle buses, cars, trucks, bicycles, pedestrians. It now has a bike lane. Cycle tracks, they are coming soon. This year we'll be installing Mount Vernon Street. That will be an on-road cycle track out in the UMass Boston area. And we've also been working with Public Works Department on construction. So you'll see cycle tracks starting to go in the ground as part of construction as early as 2014 on Seaver Street, Harrison Avenue, Summer Street, and we're obviously working on many more. Other facilities, Brighton Avenue, we've been trying to figure out, okay, what can we do on roads that just don't have the space and there's nothing else we can do. Sometimes a shared lane marking is just not enough. We worked with Tool Design Group to work with Federal Highway to do a test for a priority shared lane marking. So if you go out to Brighton Avenue right now, it might not be aggressive, you'll see some sharrows out there. It is the beginning of a test, and in phase 4 you will actually see this type of marking out there with green to highlight where the cyclist is. Other bike lanes that you'll want to note that are coming in this year, A Street and D Street in South Boston will be installed this year. Out in Alston, Brighton. This is going to make you tell where everyone's from. Alston, Brighton. Market Street and Chestnut Hill Avenue will have a bike lane as part of the New Balance project. We're looking at the connection on Cambridge Street from Sturrow Drive to Brighton Avenue. It's incredibly complex, and hopefully at some point we can get something in there. I know that's a big priority for people in that area. VFW will have a bike lane. Commonwealth Avenue will be working on the whole frontage road and getting bike facilities there. That's just some of the many bike lanes that we'll get for this year. So moving on to bike network plan, you've heard me talk way too much, probably going back 2 or 3 annual talks about the bike network plan. The good news is I can give you a date. In June, next month, June 2013, we are going to publish the final draft of the bike network plan. I'm incredibly excited about it. Tool Design Group has literally driven, well, I should say biked 400 to 700 miles in Boston, every single road in Boston to get what they have. And they've looked through every single comment that every single one of you has made to get to what will be the final draft network plan. And what is it? One thing we heard from you all that is we want this as visionary as possible. So we took a step back, reworked a lot of what we're doing on it, and said, okay, there's going to be 2 parts to the bike network plan. Number 1 is the vision, the 30-year vision, full build out. What can we do when there is construction, reconstruction, and how can we get to the end product? How do we want our city to live? And then the other part is we want to hold ourselves accountable. So it's a 5-year implementation plan. What should we see in 5 years, prioritized by most important bike facility, all with an eye towards getting 10% mode share. In working on the project, Tool Design and Boston Bikes has worked with every department in the city, every state agency, every other city agency, numerous developers, and all of the public to make sure that we know what every other project is going on in the city that could affect this, and making sure that this gets out to everyone in the community so that everyone else knows this is where Boston is headed. Okay, one thing I forgot to talk about last year was bike racks. So we've been steadily installing bike racks every year. We now have 1,370 bike racks, and I did not send an intern out to count all of the bike racks. I could be off by 1 or 2. We've come a long way since 2000 when we first started installing bike racks. We now have a city standard zero hitch rack. I'm sure all of you are familiar with it. The primary feature, unlike this rack, is 2 points of contact with the bike. You can also lock up your front wheel and the frame in one piece. But on-street parking, we were inspired by what some of the other cities have been doing with on-street parking. This is in front of the Other Side Cafe, and I shared this with you before, and we said we need to do it too. So we did a pilot on-street bike rack in front of the Other Side Cafe, and it actually truly was the definition of a pilot, because the day after I installed it, I got a call, and it was the truck driver that was trying to get into the driveway on the backside. He says, I can't get into my spot, I just can't make the turn. And so I send out our contractor, and I say, well, just push the bike rack down this way about a foot. So then the next day, I'm all content, and I get another call, and it's the person on this side, and they're trying to park and unload. And I say, look, I can't park and unload, I'm in front of the handicap ramp, that rack can't be there. So I call up the contractor, and I say, well, just push that rack about 6 inches, halfway back, we'll be fine. And of course, I got a call from that guy, and he says, I still can't, deal with the rack. So I called up the contractor, I was a little unsure what to do, and I said, take out the bolts. So they called again, and they said, it's in my way. I said, well, just nudge it with your truck, it'll be fine. Apparently it wasn't fine because the rat was last seen floating down the highway. Good doubtfuls. You should be glad about my sabbatical because in my absence, people much smarter than myself were in charge. Chris Carter, Alice Brown, Jenny Duquette, and they installed 3 new on-street bike racks that are much, much better. These are no longer a pilot. We're looking forward to installing many more of these bike racks in the future. So chalk that one up as mistake number 1. Or lesson learned. Artistic racks. Today we have 7 artistic racks in the ground. We work primarily with Artists Humanity to design these racks. They're in Mission Hill, downtown Crossing. We've got one on Boylston Street. And we have a really special one that we installed in downtown Crossing. This one was commissioned a few years ago by myself and special events team. And it's really a special rack. For instance, if you were to park your bike and walk to the end or the T, go into a meeting, you can be assured that your bike will not be there when you get back. I know art is really a preference, and when I was preparing this presentation, I did a quick net search for World's Ugliest Bike Rack, and this one actually showed up. So this probably is mistake number 2. It actually reminds me a little bit when I was a kid, I took violin lessons for 6 years, and after 6 years, my violin teacher looked at me and said, you're a good athlete, aren't you? The same goes for art. There will be no more bike racks commissioned by me. Okay, Hubway. I think you guys all know there was another birthday this year. Hubway turned 1 year old in 2012. We now have 72 bike stations in the city of Boston. There's 105 or 6. Regionally, I can never get the count just right. And I remember a meeting that we had early on when we were talking about bringing bike share to Boston. There was a city meeting, and it became clear that we were going to have to fundraise $6 million to bring bike share to Boston. And the important thing is bike share to date has cost no city money. We have not used any city money. It's all been fundraised. So I'm sitting in this meeting. And it becomes clear that we are going to have to raise somewhere between $5 and $6 million. And I sort of say, well, I don't think that'll be a problem. And they sort of look at me like, what do you mean $5 million is not a problem? And for many of you that know, I have a background as a professional bike racer for a number of years and ran a few of the professional bike teams that I was on. And there was nothing harder than trying to fundraise for white, wealthy, overeducated women that want to ride their bikes. Bike share was easy. So what have we done? To date, bike share has had 810,000 trips. That's about 2,200 trips per day. In the peak season, we're looking at 40,000 to 60,000 trips per month. One thing I think is fantastic. This is April of this year. This is April of last year. We have a 50% increase in ridership. That probably corresponds to the new stations in Cambridge. We have had over 10,000 annual members subscribe at one point or another. This last April, again, it was our highest month of new members with 1,790 new members signing up for Hubway. Again, it's because it's regional. We're the first major system to be truly regional with 4 cities involved. And this hasn't changed much since last year at the chocolate station. That hasn't changed much probably because it's the exact same slide I showed you last year. But the main stations are no surprise. They tend to be downtown where traffic volume is high, where there's the most cyclists, where there's the most pedestrians. And we also see a lot of volume around the transit hubs. So North Station, South Station, BPL, Boylston, and Arlington, Newbury, and Hartford. Those were and are the top 5. It's also a media sensation. The media loves Hubway, and I think this is an important point because as cyclists, one of the things we want to do is get ever more people involved in cycling, and this is free media, free advertising for us. I got a fun call the other day. It was story on Hubway. It was a strange story. They're like, how many Mayor Menino logos are on all of the bicycles? And what they were really doing is they were tracking every single sign in the entire city with Mayor Menino on. For any of you that have looked around Boston, that's a lot. So I said, well, there's about 72 stations, 710 bikes. They said, where are the bikes? They said, well, they're everywhere. They're Boston, Cambridge, Brookline, Somerville. They could be anywhere. And it reminded me of one of my favorite interns, and we had this conversation a couple of years ago. And she said, Nicole, why does every sign have Mayor Menino on it? I said, well, he's been mayor a long time, since pretty much when I was in middle school. And she said, well, what are we going to do if, there's a new mayor? I said, well, no one really knows. No one can remember. And of course, this was right in the last mayoral election. And she looks at me, she's like, I think his campaign slogan should be, it'll be cheaper that way. One of the pieces I'm most proud of is our subsidized Hubway memberships. And when we launched Hubway, we worked with the Boston Public Health Commission, and we worked with the mayor, and we said, look, Hubway is about all Boston residents. And thank you, Jeff. And we made a commitment. We were going to sell 500 subsidized memberships for $5 to low-income residents. And we hosted a meeting at City Hall with some leaders from different public service agencies. And in our first month, we sold 20 subsidized memberships. And I looked at my program manager, Sam Curran, and I said, oh my gosh, this is going to be really hard. And we said, this is impossible, and we're going to do it. So I said, Sam, it doesn't matter how much time you spend on this for your job, we're going to do it, and we're going to get it done. She did the most fantastic job. We did sell 550 subsidized memberships. She went door to door to door to door to every social service agency and sold those memberships, and it is a huge hit. I think at this point we probably have about 10% of our members are low income. About half of those are on public assistance. So Hubway is slated to expand this year. This is our phase 2 expansion. We're going to be expanding into Roxbury and Jamaica Plain, more into South Boston, more into Charlestown, and then we'll densify the whole system. We want your feedback. We have been working with a new startup group from MIT, Co-Urbanize. It's up right now. You can go right to the Co-Urbanize website and give us all your comments on where you want stations. But again, bike share is about every resident, all neighborhoods, and we're looking at how do we expand to the rest of the city and what are the phases, and I think we can do it. And the part that I really love is the Helmet Hub machine. Steve, who actually gave all of my presentation for me, which was fantastic. Thank you. Gave it away, but we worked with a team of students from MIT a year ago, and one of the professors from MIT came up to me and he said, Nicole, do you have any bike projects that perhaps my students could work on for their senior capstone project? I think he was thinking like some bike trinket or something. And I said, well, I happen to have a project. Do you think they could create a third-generation bike helmet vending machine? You swipe a credit card, get a helmet, and you can return it on the back end, get it cleaned, et cetera, return, rent, or sale. 3 months later, I was sitting in an auditorium like this, and they were presenting their bike helmet vending machine. So we just gave them the award to bring the first bike helmet vending machine in the U.S. to the city of Boston. We hope to have 4 helmet machines up in July, August, and then we'll do another 15 or so bike helmet vending machines by the end of the season. We'll be testing it throughout. And it's really been a fantastic project. Now they're 1 year out of school, and there's nothing more awkward than negotiating with a 23-year-old. Okay, so other little details.
You're only 21.
I'm 20 plus 21. It's my second 20th birthday, which should make me more mature. So since the beginning, we've been tracking job growth. We've seen about a 199% increase in jobs. You'd think I could round that up, but I didn't. That's about 600 new jobs. These are just direct jobs in the bike world. This is in the midst of a recession. Most recently, and I think this is a telling sign, we've had 2 international brands set up their U.S. headquarters in Boston. BMC of Switzerland, and Victoria Industries, the largest manufacturer of bike tires in the country. And I thought it was interesting. I was talking to the CEO of Victoria, and he was telling me why he chose Boston. He said, well, we were looking at Boulder and Seattle and Boston because we really wanted a strong bike culture. And I'd never heard us lumped with Boulder and Seattle. Hub on Wheels and the Mayor's Cup, it continues to grow. For those of you, who's been on Hub on Wheels? Great. For those of you that haven't, it's a really pleasant ride. We actually closed down Sturo Drive. It's the one day a year you can bike on a car through the Sturo Drive. And then it meanders on a lot of the nice bike paths of the city and along the coast. Really pleasant. On the back end, it's sheer chaos. And one of my favorite moments, and we're going to have to chalk this up to mistake or lesson learned number 3. A few years ago, I get a call, and it's one of our freshman volunteers. And we've got a ride marshal. She's stationed out in one of the neighborhoods. And she calls me up, and she says, Nicole, I think I missed my ride. I said, what do you mean you missed your ride? She said, well, some nice guys in a white van stopped and asked me if I wanted a ride. And we said, that was not, that wasn't your ride. Anyway, she's okay. We have stopped leaving freshman women out alone on the streets. Bike Week and Bike Fridays continues as always and continues to grow. This last week we added an East Boston route. Kim Foltz headed it up. It was unbelievable. They had the largest route ever. They had 40 cyclists on their convoy. Fantastic job to East Boston. And we supported many of the advocate groups in setting up Boston's first Open Streets initiative, Circle the City, and we're looking forward to this one. For those of you that don't know, it is very hard to put on an event in Boston. Steve Miller knows we're trying to set up Hub on Wheels, but so one day for Circle the City, I go in, and you have to go in front of the special events committee, and I come into the meeting, and there's a room, and there's literally a table as long as this whole thing, and there's 20 people lined up on it, and you go in the room, and no one says anything. And there's one head at the way at the end, and she goes like this, which means, okay, begin. And I give my little shield, no one says anything. And after about 10 minutes, the policeman looks up at me and says, you know you want to close the entire city, don't you? And I said, yes. And then I walked out, and somehow that worked. We now have Circle the City. For those of you that don't know, last week we hosted our first Ride of Silence. Thank you to Joel Feingold for setting it up. It was in honor of cyclists that have been killed on the roads. It's a really important event, and I do hope that all of you go. It's an international Ride of Silence. We timed it with the international ride. Very powerful and very important. Okay, so I'm going to take a little break because I'm sure you guys need a little break from me. Most of my friends do very often too. I'm going to turn it over to Jenny Duquette, who's my program manager. She's going to talk about our community bike programs.
Thank you. Good evening. Equity and encouragement in education are the focus of the community cycling programs. Tonight I'm going to talk about the youth cycling program and roll it forward. The youth cycling program, affectionately called YCP for short, partners with Boston Public Schools and community centers to bring bike education and access to the youth of Boston. Typically, a school hosts 2 instructors and a fleet of bikes during the school day. After an interactive classroom-based safety workshop, each class is held on bike. Some students, from the very young to seniors in high school, learn how to ride a bike for the first time. This is a magical moment, as you can imagine, inspires confidence and excitement in the students, as well as determination leading up to it. It's probably one of my favorite parts of this job, is teaching people how to ride and seeing that excitement as they learn how to ride. Our biggest focus is on developing strong riding and handling skills through games, interactive activities, and group rides to prepare students to be able to safely get around by bike. If you've been in the right place at the right time, you've most likely seen our large group of students with matching helmets on giant bikes riding on the Southwest Corridor in Franklin Park or bike lanes in between. When you see us, don't mind our large group size and riders learning bike courtesy. Give us a hello, words of encouragement, or a high five as we welcome the students into the biking community. And please excuse the one kid who feels the need to pop a wheelie in the middle of a group ride. There's always at least one. In 2012 alone, we offered 29 YCP sessions at 21 sites across 14 different neighborhoods, with 3,967 youth participating. That's nearly 4,000 youth learning and being encouraged to bike in Boston. And for 2013, I think the numbers are going to be even bigger, since we're on track this spring to hit those numbers alone. While this is fun and rewarding work, it takes a lot of energy and enthusiasm, from moving 100 bikes every 1 or 2 weeks to corralling third graders on bikes to line up, to leading 30 high school students safely through the streets of Boston with that one kid doing the wheelie. I'd like to acknowledge the tremendous hard work and dedication of the Boston Bikes instructors and mechanics. I don't think any of them are here tonight, but if you see them out, they're amazing people doing great work with the youth of Boston. Our other flagship program is Roll It Forward. Through a huge collaborative effort, we collect unwanted bikes, fix them up, and donate them to low-income Boston residents who might not otherwise have access to a bike. Has anyone here donated a bike to Roll It Forward? Excellent. Thank you. Thanks to not only the public who donates bikes, but to the shops who collect and hold on to them for us, as well as private organizations and public organizations we partner with, like universities, apartment buildings, the police, and public works who give us abandoned bikes. International Bicycle Centers alone donates hundreds of kids' bikes each year through their trade-up program. Roll It Forward would not be possible without the countless support from so many community members and businesses. To give you a sense of numbers, in 2012, we collected over 500 bikes and rolled 428 bikes forward. Since the program's inception, we've gotten 1,884 bikes out to Bostonians who wouldn't have had a bike otherwise. This spring, we've renewed the call for more bikes through press releases, social media, new flyers, bike drives, and new drop-off locations. I'm glad to say, in just these first few months of 2013, we've had an increase of bikes rolling in, which will help us meet our goal of giving away 600 bikes in 2013. When I talk about Roll It Forward, most people have a clear sense of the collection and repair process, but less of a sense of how people actually get the bikes. The bikes, paired with a helmet and a lock, accompanied by a safety workshop, are distributed in partnership with community and government organizations. To give you some examples. Earlier this year, we did a giveaway with Artists for Humanity in South Boston, which employs teen artists. At the end, as we were cleaning up, one young man came up to one of our instructors, looked him in the eye, took his hand, and said, "Thank you. Do you know what kind of blessing this is in my life? This is such a blessing. Thank you." He said it with such intensity and sincerity that I wish I could capture that moment for every person who supports our program to see and feel. Just this past Saturday, I did another giveaway with youth in the Big Brother Big Sister program. Littles and bigs attended together, learning bike safety and going on a bike ride through Franklin Park together. As we closed up the truck to leave, one of the big brothers, whose little struggled to ride with the group, said to me, "Thank you, this is so awesome and just the beginning for us. We'll keep biking a little more each day." Within their mentoring relationship, they can now share biking together and encourage each other. Lift Boston works with clients to raise themselves out of poverty. These recipients are not given a bike, but instead volunteer and complete an application to earn their bikes. Bikes offer a no-cost alternative to the T that gets them to their appointments and job interviews with exercise in between. As for the future, we already said we would like to hit 600 bikes for 2013. Some exciting upcoming partnerships include partnering with 4 green teams this summer, from the Hyde Park CDC, Emerald Necklace Conservancy, Boston Housing Authority, and the Revision Urban Farm. All of these programs will employ teams to do work in parks or farms, parks and farms, to which in between they will travel via bicycle. Just visualize that for a moment. Nearly 70 teams working throughout Boston to improve green spaces, all traveling by bike. If that's not green innovation, I don't know what is. I could go on all night telling you stories about the community cycling programs. They're mostly shared over my dinner table each night as I debrief my day. Lots of entertainment from the students we work with. But Nicole's itching to get back up here. So to pull all this together, as the community programs enter into their 4th year, I can definitively say that as time goes on, we're infiltrating the community and regularly seeing the impact of our programs. We have youth at events who know everything because we've already taught them in schools, or rollover forward recipients who know how to safely check a bike because they've participated with us or our friends over at Bikes Not Bombs. We're truly rolling Boston forward and growing the cycling community from a young age through to adults. Thank you, and back to Nicole.
Thank you, Jenny. That is truly some of my favorite programs that Boston Bikes does. She does an unbelievable job and has taken it to the next step. So, as many of you know, in 2012 we had 5 fatalities on Boston streets. In response to that, the mayor asked the city to prepare a cyclist safety report. The final draft was posted online today. The final edition was posted online today. The most important piece of the cyclist safety report is the mayor's commitment to reducing the cyclist injury rate by 50% by 2020. And it seems only fitting, if we have a goal for mode share, 10% mode share by 2020, we need to marry that with the cyclist safety goal, 50% reduction by 2020. So what does the report say? And I'm just going to summarize a little bit because I'm sure all of you have memorized the entire report by now. But number one, we looked at the number of incidents over time, and what we're finding in Boston is the number of incidences, both with police department data and EMS data, is staying roughly the same. BPD in the last 3 years has seen a 2% increase in crashes. EMS has seen an increase of 9%. Meanwhile, cycling has increased somewhere between 16 and 28% in the country. We definitely don't have enough data to make any conclusions. Around the country, though, there's a phenomenon called safety in numbers that has been documented, which is when the number of cyclists on the street increase, the crash rate goes down, and the number of instances tends to stay flat. So we could be seeing a similar trend here in Boston. The other thing we saw is age. The average age for a cyclist injury is about 21. The peak age is about 21, and half of the accidents are taking place for kids between 18 and 30. There we go. Gender, men are involved in 70% of the crashes, more or less, throughout the city. It does not mean they're overrepresented, however, in crashes. Men represent about 70% of all of the cyclists on the street in Boston. So that is consistent. Hours of the day, what we're seeing is that the cyclist crash rate goes up at peak hours, 5 p.m., midday peak hour, and a.m. peak hour. So when there's the most cars on the road, the most pedestrians, and the most cyclists, we're seeing the crash rate go up and the injury rate go up. And helmets, the other key finding we found is, 72% of cyclists in Boston are wearing helmets. With cyclists that are being taken away in ambulances or being seen by the EMS, only about half of them are wearing helmets. So that doesn't mean that you're more likely to get into a crash if you're not wearing a helmet, but what it does mean is you're more likely to be needing EMS attention if you're not wearing a helmet. And then crash type, this is not surprising at all, but the majority of crashes, both seen by EMS and the police department, do involve a motor vehicle. So many of you probably saw the front page article in the Globe covering the crash report, and there was one key finding there, one thing that came out of the police department data, which was very compelling. It was looking at behavioral factors in incidences. And the police don't always track this, but in the cases where they noticed a behavioral factor, they could sort of say, was a cyclist behavioral factor noted, or a driver behavioral factor. Unfortunately, someone that had helped on the report, myself, actually made a math error that was quite significant that made it onto the front page of the Boston Globe, changing the number, making it look like the cyclists were involved in more of the crashes than the drivers. Fortunately, we had some great researchers from the police department, from the Boston Area Research Institute that caught the error, and we've now corrected it. And the correct data is right here. When there's factors that were noted, 55% of those factors are sort of shown as driver behaviors factors, and 44% are cyclists. The key thing to note here is it's pretty even, the behavioral factors. And what the heck are these behavioral factors? Could be anything from running a stoplight, playing with electronic devices, not paying attention. And the key numbers to note are 24% of the crashes that had a behavioral factor noted included a cyclist running a red light, running a stop sign, or riding into oncoming traffic. That's 24% of the incidences cited by the police department. Number two, 22% of the incidences was a vehicle door extended by a car, and 18% of them was a driver not seeing a cyclist. And keep in mind, a driver could not see a cyclist because the cyclist is not having any lights at night, or the cyclist is coming up fast in a blind spot. But that's just sort of beginning data that starts to tell a picture of what is happening on our streets. The next key part is, well, what the heck do we do about it? And the report comes up with a number of recommendations. Number one is infrastructure. Most important thing the city can do, what it has done, what it will continue to do, is to add infrastructure to the city of Boston. And that includes cycle tracks and other features that are known to decrease the crash injury rate. It's also about addressing some of the hot spots. Through the police department data via EMS, we identified a number of hotspot roads: Mass Ave, Palm Ave, Boylston, Beacon, Dorchester, Huntington. And if you look at where cyclists are riding, there is a strong correlation between where the most cyclists ride and where the accidents are happening. But addressing these hotspot areas, to date we did add bike lanes on Mass Ave, we did add bike lanes on Palm Ave, we have Sarah's that were just added to Huntington, and we have Dorchester Ave facilities. A lot of the data was obviously before the facilities were installed, and we definitely have a recommendation to look at before and after. The second type of recommendation is really looking at targeted routes where we can have a lot of impact. Number one, looking at taxi drivers. We have a growing issue, and we recently installed 1,825 stickers on taxi cabs that remind the drivers and the passengers to look before they open the door. And then, as Steve mentioned, we are running the largest pilot in the country for vehicle side guards. Public Works has added 19 vehicle side guards on their large vehicles. Hopefully we can continue and expand this very important program. So before I end, I always like to thank a lot of people. All of you know that the mayor's office and the mayor's team has done a tremendous amount of work in this. But I do want to recognize a few key people. So this is our second annual Boston Bikes Awards ceremony. And Jenny, you need to come up with me on this. So award number one is the Community Partner of the Year Award. And this goes to the Boston Area Research Initiative, spearheaded by Diana Lopez. When we looked at that crash report data, what you didn't know was the 350, 400 hours that was spent behind the scenes, collating all of that data and really coming up with some tremendous work. I think it is, as Pete Stidman wrote in his blog, a landmark study, and we're ever grateful. So we want to bring you up. And Captain Dinalaki is the police cycling contact. Number two, while I was off having a fantastic sabbatical, the programs continued and grew and kept going. So we have a very special award that we have never given before, and hopefully we'll never have to give again unless Hawaii has some sales on their flights. This goes to Chris Carter. His award is the most valuable player, and he deserves a standing ovation. And the last award, which is not one that we do every year, but we did happen to do one last year, is the Lifetime Advocate Award. And this one goes to Steve Miller. So, we talked about our top five lessons learned, and the number one lesson learned / mistake was right from the beginning. It was our Commonwealth Avenue ribbon cutting for the very first bike lane in the city of Boston. Here we have the Com Ave bike lane ribbon cutting, and boom, right in the back you see the mayor's vehicle parked in the bike lane. And about 15 police doing nothing. Anyway, I'm going to erase this photograph from the internet. And as usual, I have my favorite best of the worst slides because I have to. And while this is running, I do want That's actually a real shot, and I can't remember the city from that one. So as with every year, it does take an entire community to make Boston bike friendly, particularly from where we were starting. So I want certain people to stand up. Number one, any city staff that are in the audience, including Denise back there. Anyone else that works for a government agency on bicycle projects, stand right up. Anyone that has ever part of a bike-friendly business. Stand up and I want you to say anyone that is a member of an advocate organization, Livable Streets Alliance, Mass Bike, Boston Cyclists Union, any other involvement. I think I could get the last of you. Anyone that rides a bicycle? Thank you all. You are what makes Boston a fantastic bicycling city. And now is the time that you can ask all the questions you want.
And we have a couple of microphones, so the Phil Donahue's over here can go.
Nicole, as someone who bikes Lincoln Street in Kenmore Square, what's the engineering fix for that spot where we had the fatality the other day?
I don't know offhand, and it would be premature to say. One of the recommendations coming out of the crash report that is very important is to use all the data that we can get from police reports when we're fixing hot spots. And one thing I've learned about engineering is we might go in with a lot of assumptions and they can be proven all wrong. So we can say it was probably the truck didn't see it was turning right. We don't know yet. We really want to look at all of the data. But that is a hot spot and we need to look at it. Sorry I didn't have the answer.
We'll go back and forth.
Nicole, my name's Bruce. Before I say anything, I want to say thank you, welcome back.
Thank you.
And great job by the mayor, you and all the team. But I want to raise your vision a little bit because I haven't seen, I think about once in your slides, the real comparison we should make. So I've been lucky enough to, and we're looking at the wrong cities when you compare us to Portland, San Francisco. I'm not seeing the cities that I've been lucky enough to bike in: Berlin, Amsterdam, and Copenhagen. And Copenhagen, and there's a key feature there that everyone here, since there's so much passion, probably knows about, but I want to put it on your radar, which is that the proper bike lane in Copenhagen, and I just wrote you about this, is not on the street. It's on the sidewalk. It's painted on the sidewalk. So much of the energy that you're putting into bending helmets and keeping trucks from putting people under wheels is good, but it wouldn't be necessary if the bike lane were on the sidewalk. In Copenhagen, 90% of people don't wear helmets. There's no issue with trucks like that. So please look into those cities that lead so much. It's not just America.
Great point. I wish you had been there at many of our other presentations. The mayor made a commitment to transform Boston into a world-class cycling city. That includes Copenhagen, Amsterdam, where we are seeing 30% bike mode share. But I'll tell you, the best goals that you can make are, you have a goal there, and you better have goals all the way to get there, or you'll never hit them. And that's why we look at DC, and then Portland, and then Copenhagen, because we have to take baby steps to get to the end. We are looking at cycle tracks. I'm sure you saw that slide. Many of those are sidewalk level cycle tracks. We can do those with reconstruction projects. In the interim, we're definitely going to be doing street level cycle tracks because we need to make a difference now. We can't just wait 30 years.
I totally agree.
And that's why helmets do matter. Now, we don't have the luxury of the little crash race.
Yes, I agree on that. Yeah. I guess I'm saying just put in your presentation that longer vision.
Yep.
Are there studies that show or ways that we can get out to the car community or work with the car community, saying that if we build more infrastructure for cars and parking, it's actually going to lead to more congestion and traffic jams than all the cyclists that I see going down Beacon Street and that are taking, and the team that's taking cyclists and riders out of their cars and freeing up the roads if we build more livable streets.
Point well taken. I always say if I could do anything in my power to make Boston bike friendly, I would never put in a single bike lane. I would add a congestion charge, put in a $10 gas tax, remove all the parking. If there's any parking left, charge an arm and a leg. Good thing I'm not running for elected office.
Hi, my name is Vern Gender. I volunteered today, and I am here because I am concerned about being killed. Who else in here is concerned about that? Applause. So, I went through the intersection where the woman was killed on my way here. I'll also use it on the way out. There's no way for me to avoid that intersection. That's the way that I can get home. I'm going to just give out some numbers for people who don't know. This is the 6th fatality in 12 months. That is, I believe you can correct me if I'm wrong, 6 times as much as previous years. Okay, 6 times as much. Okay, this to me is a crisis, and I do not understand why this whole meeting hasn't been about it. You know, and I do appreciate all the things all the good things that have happened. But to me, this is completely unacceptable. I also want to just talk about some of those crash statistics, because I think that they mislead people. Some of the statistics of the fatalities, you know, we're seeing, the crashes are all about apparently young, reckless men. I'm sorry, but 3 of the 6 fatalities were women. One of them was a 63-year-old man. Okay, we're not talking about bike error. We're not talking about user error. If we were, you know, a lot of these accidents and fatalities, they'd be Hubway riders, because let's face it, they don't really know what they're doing, a lot of them. You know, you have to learn somehow. But, you know, and even those of us who are very careful cyclists, you know, unless we think that we're God, we know that we can't be completely 100% careful all the time, and all of us have close calls. You know, and I also want to talk about the fact that 5 of those 6 fatalities were because of large vehicles. Okay, and I'm not talking about an SUV, I'm talking about an 18-wheeler, I'm talking about an MBTA bus. Okay, to get an idea of what a hazard those things are, the 6th person who hit someone and the only person to be charged was a drunk driver. So that's what we're dealing with here, and I'd just like to hear you guys address it, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I recommend reading the entire report. One thing that it was very good at doing, I think, is sticking to the data and the facts and trying to understand, okay, what is myth, what is real, what can we prove, and then say what are possible recommendations based on the data. And I think the key finding in terms of what can we do today is there is no magic bullet. We have to do everything we can, and that means working with the drivers and educating the drivers. It means infrastructure, and it means for us cyclists, everyone that chooses to bike now, we do need to take as much precaution as we can, and that means following rules of the road, stopping at stop signs, stopping at lights, wearing a helmet. It may not have saved a single life in any of those instances, but fatalities are not statistically significant. We have to do everything we can as a city and as an individual to be as safe as possible.
I'm someone who wears a helmet all the time, and I'm a very cautious cyclist. You know, if I didn't say that beforehand, people would think that I was going through red lights all the time. And I just want to say that, like on Sunday, when somebody is hit by a garbage truck, it does not matter whether they wear a helmet or not. Like I used to work for a home shelter that had a van that was hit by a garbage truck that went through a red light, you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning. That van was totaled. Okay, that was a van. That was not a human body. So I think a lot of us get very impatient when we hear, oh, well, you know, if you just wear a helmet, you'll be okay. That's
Disrespectfully, that's not what I said. I said it takes everything and there's no magic bullet. I said we need to do infrastructure. We need to do education of the drivers, education of the cyclists. We need to take personal precautions. That's what the data said. I recommend wearing a helmet. I wear a helmet. It is up to you if you want to wear a helmet. I will wear a helmet. Let's do the next question.
Hi. Is this on? Yeah. Hi, my name is Carissa D. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And thank you for having us not in February. I think I've been to all 5 of them, and I think this is the first one that I've actually bicycled to because the weather has been so lousy. It's not great today, but
I was sick of winter.
it's better. I think the momentum in Boston has been great. I've been watching it from my home on the other side of the river and appreciating it when I ride over here. My question is specific to maintenance. We've put in a lot of miles. There are a surprising number of miles that are already gone. And I want to know what the city is going to do to track and what we're doing in terms of maintenance planning.
Great question. In the next fiscal year, meaning starting July, we now have a revolving maintenance budget just for maintenance of bike lanes. And we'll probably look at mostly a 5-year cycle. Thermos will last 5 to 7 years. But every year we'll go out, we'll look at all of the bike lane miles on the street, assess them, fix the ones that need to be fixed. So it's in the budget.
I just want to say that that the main focus, I mean, one thing that the statistics showed was the importance of driver behavior. And I know the Boston Globe was wrong when they printed it the other way the first time, that it was more the bicyclist behavior problem. But this meeting was conducted as if that error were the truth. And I heard nothing about what was going to be done about educating drivers about their part in keeping this safe and making it safe for bicyclists. And that's what and I also want to hear from the police when they're going to start citing people for parking in bike lanes. When the first bike lane was opened in Roslindale, and I was biking on it the first day, there was a police car parked in front of a Dunkin' Donuts on the bike lane. And I said that at a meeting just like this a couple of years ago. And in the meantime, nothing has changed. Or that's not true. It's not true. There have been a lot of infrastructure changes, which are great. And I was in the Riot of Silence last week, which I thought was great. And it was great that the city was involved in that. But in my opinion, the people in this audience, because of what happened yesterday and because of the continued dooring and the continuation of people hanging immediate right-hand turns in front of me when I'm driving down the street, and multitude other things that the drivers should be educated about, it's just not happening.
It's a great question, and I didn't include everything that we do here. So driver education is a big part of what we do. It's a big part of what we're planning, and is in the recommendations. Currently, every year we send flyers about rules of the road for drivers, how to drive safely around cyclists, to every single driver in Boston. That's 450,000 to 500,000 drivers. They get it every single year. We're piloting.
I never received one. And I live in the city of Boston.
Is your excise tax in Boston?
What's that?
Excise tax in
Yes.
Boston? They definitely do go out. I guarantee it. Number 2, we've piloting the taxi cab dooring. If that's a success, one thing that's been done in other cities is right above no parking signs in the regulations. They have no dooring for cyclists. There's an immense number of things we can do. We've met with the R&B, and we're talking with them, what can we do with driver education on the driver's test? What can we do with the media on safety campaigns? What can we do with outdoor advertising? It is all in there. I just didn't include it, and I'm sorry.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Albrecht. I did a study of the 5-foot-wide bike lane on Commonwealth Avenue near Packard's Corner. I parked my car exactly inside the parking lane and left the car door open for 30 minutes to see where cyclists would ride. Every one of the 15 cyclists photographed rode outside the bike lane to avoid the open door. The Hampshire Street study demonstrated that cyclists ride farther from parked cars when there is a bike lane. My study shows that every 5-foot bike lane next to parked cars is entirely within the door zone. Riding in them is like playing Russian roulette. Our safety cannot depend upon people looking before opening a car door. To be safe, my friends Preeti, 11-year-old Aman, and I must ride in the traffic lane on Com Ave. I have been honked at, told, move over, bike lane. I respond to them with this sign. There are no excuses for giving motor vehicles an enormous share of our public space at the expense of safe passage for bicycles. Our major streets can accommodate wide bike lanes if a travel or parking lane were removed, or on Com Ave, the 24-foot wide sidewalks were narrowed. Safe passage for cyclists, be they 7, 20, or 90, must take precedence over flow of motor traffic or car storage. I would like a response to the results from my bike lane study, and would Boston please provide wider bike lanes next to parked cars that AASHTO recommends, so that I, Preeti, and 11-year-old Aman do not have to ride in the traffic lane.
So, we as a city that believe strongly in bicycle lanes. When we put in bike lanes, we are following the best practices from around the country. NACTO guidelines, AASHTO guidelines, Cities for Cycling guidelines. They do show that a 5-foot bike lane is good. And I understand your point. It is in the door zone partially. One thing we know is
Totally in the door.
adding that bike lane is safer. The studies show that it is still safer than no bike lane. When possible, we do always add width. So you look at Beacon Street actually approaching Kenmore Square. That's larger. Beacon Street under the Chestnut Hill Reservoir, wider. Congress Street, we've got a buffer. Seaport Boulevard, we have a buffer. We have removed travel lanes. We have removed parking. We will continue to. One thing we have to do is, in this day and age, we do need to balance things because we do have competing interests for our street. If we try to remove a 20-foot sidewalk and chop it down, there will be people.
I wasn't saying removing it, just taking
But
it.
if we do that, there will be battles.
It was just an idea. But it's not that it's partially in the door zone, it is entirely in the door zone. When I ride on Commonwealth Avenue, I cannot ride in the bike lane because I don't want to be doored.
Send me an email, we can definitely sit down. It is actually partially in the bike lane, not fully in the bike lane.
No,
And there's a lot of studies that show that it is.
Every single one of those cyclists, and this was on a day in January, during the morning commute, they're all experienced cyclists, I assume, who's going to ride on a cold January morning. And they all had to go out of the bike lane to go out to get around my car door. I felt a little funny keeping my door open, but
Next time, close the door.
well, I mean, every single one of those cars could potentially open the car door. At least with my car, we could see ahead of time.
Come into the office, we can look at it all together. Guaranteed. Question over there.
Hi, my name is Karina. I'm from Bikes Not Bombs. So I work for Bikes Not Bombs, and I'm a senior in high school. And my question is that so there's a lot of safe bike infrastructure, bike racks, and subway stations that are built in areas like downtown where they work to serve a certain population, and that population is people who can afford bikes and have credit cards. And I was wondering what has been done to reach out to the populations of people like students from Dorchester and Roxbury who can't complain about the lack of bike infrastructure in their areas because they don't have bikes, so they can't afford bikes. So they're probably, they can't complain about the infrastructure in those areas. And the lack of encouragement for them to even be cyclists. So I was wondering what work has been done towards that.
Great question. When the mayor started the bike program, he was very strong in saying this is a bike program for all Boston residents. And I think since then we've really established ourselves as the leader in equity. So when it came to Hubway, we started to subsidize memberships, and we made sure right from the beginning we were in Roxbury with low-income stations. When I say we've sold 600 subsidized memberships for $5, I look at every other city. They were giving them away for free. No other city has had even 100 redeemed. So we're way ahead, and we'll continue to push forward and do more and more. I had a meeting with the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. We were talking about bikes. The topic that came up out of that meeting, we said, well, what are the issues? And it wasn't the cool factor like everyone was saying. It was, just like you said, access to bikes. And if they had a bike, they didn't have money to get it fixed. And from that, we got a grant. We started the community bike program. Since then, we've donated 1,884 bikes. and trained over 12,000 youth in cycling. In addition to that, we helped Pete Stidman from Boston Cyclists Union start Bike to Market, which does free bike repairs in all of the farmers markets, particularly in low-income neighborhoods. Our goal is to continue and always do better, continue to expand Hubway, and expand all of those programs.
Do you mind if I ask one more specific question? Have you also looked to put bike racks in public schools in areas like Roxbury and Dorchester?
We have over 50% of the public schools covered, and we're continuing with all of the rest of them. Absolutely.
Thank you.
First of all, thanks for everything you do. I certainly understand that there's a lot of out-of-the-box thinking, very aggressive, forward-leaning administration, and thanks to the advocacy groups as well. But in the spirit of out-of-the-box thinking, when you look at the history of industrial safety, somebody great-minded thinker noticed that for every one death, there were 10 severe accidents and about 300 incidences of simple malfeasance. And if you can just treat the simple malfeasance, then you're going to avoid those 10 major calamities and the death. I see the same thing on our roadways. Unfortunately, the way to correct it is highly political, but who doesn't see dozens of cars every day running red lights, making sloppy turns, speeding? I mean, these are things I observe personally when I'm driving or I'm biking, and I think, gee, if we can only stop the casual red light running and these other things, then that day when someone gets run over by someone doing 45 in a 30 zone and a person dies who might not have died at speed 30, won't happen. And so then I look to the ability for us citizens through the Citizens Connect to report graffiti, potholes, trash cans that haven't been emptied. And I think, I film my rides. I have a helmet camera. I've got incidences, I'm sure other people in this room do too, of people behaving badly on the roads. Could there be a mechanism for citizens to submit that to the city and there'd be some follow-up? I know it's not evidence in a court of law, but maybe a stern letter or something. Concurrently, things like street traffic light cameras, probably things that lots of people smarter than me have thought of, and probably state-level stuff like traffic light cameras, speed cameras. These are things that will push drivers' behavior towards being better, and it'll save drivers' lives, pedestrians' lives, and cyclists' lives as well.
Some great points. Number one, you are correct that probably EMS data and DVD data, it might be capturing only 1 in 10 incidents. And what we did is we did a Boston Bikes accident survey, which is shown there. And one of the goals was, can we capture all of these smaller incidents to get a bigger picture and more data? And what we found, and why I come up with that 1 in 10%, is in that data, only 1 out of every 10 incidents required any kind of hospital visit. So we have vastly more data to study, and we actually have a lot more analysis that we can do. One thing I think is really, really important is that we are all responsible for our safety. We're all drivers, we're all pedestrians, and we're all cyclists. And we can't just blame the drivers, and they just can't blame us. And we have to stop making it an us versus them. I think Hubway does that very well because people that ride Hubway are not necessarily cyclists. And just one thing to think about is a show of hands for anyone that jaywalked in the last week. Just raise your hand and raise it high. Okay, we all jaywalked. There were a number of accidents that happened because pedestrians walked right into the front of cyclists, and there were a lot of accidents that happened because cyclists ran into pedestrians. Who has, in the last week in a car, sped up a little bit when the light was yellow or orange? Raise your hand high. Okay, we are also the problem there. And number 3, who on a bike did run a red light in the last week? Okay, so we need to think responsibly, and we need to make sure that drivers do better, we do better, pedestrians better. It's about all of us if we want safe streets.
bike lanes and bike paths. And I would like to know if you had any suggestions on how to get the cities on board to maintaining bike routes and bike paths around the city in that time, so we still have access to them. Particularly for me, it was always Alewife Davis Square Path.
I am so glad I'm Boston because I can't answer for Somerville on that path. For Boston itself, though, number one thing that we can all do is always call the mayor's 24-hour hotline, 635-4500. They are very responsive. It's the most responsive administration I've ever seen. We are working with Public Works. We know we can do much better in terms of plowing our bike lanes. There were some issues this year, and we'll definitely be working with them year after year to make sure we get ever better.
Hi, my name is Paul Larrabee. I'm a truck driver in Boston. Cyclists in the U.S. are told to wear a helmet to improve their safety. Helmets do not prevent danger from occurring. The Dutch oppose helmet promotion. They focus on causes rather than on victims of danger. That's the most effective way to reduce the risk of head, brain, and facial injuries. In the Netherlands, bicycling is free from conflict with cars. The bicycling injury rate per distance traveled is 21 times higher in the U.S. than in the Netherlands. The fatality rate is 5 times higher in the U.S. For school children, the fatality rate per distance traveled is 15 times higher in the U.S. than in the Netherlands. The Dutch bicycling infrastructure is so well designed that cyclists traveling 25 miles per hour easily pass slow cyclists on wide bike lanes. Parents ride side by side with their small children, and old people ride bicycles around town. Helmets are not seen on adults nor on children. Please focus on the causes of danger rather than the victims of danger by providing infrastructure in Boston that is free from conflict with cars. That is what will encourage more people to bicycle. The health benefits of cycling far outweigh the risks of bicycling without a helmet. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. One thing I want to say is this is where we are right now. Who does wear a helmet when they ride? Okay. So I know that infrastructure is probably the most important thing we can do, but I'll tell you, even if the helmet is only going to work 5% of the time, I think that's why we want to wear a helmet now. Because when we're talking about our brains and brain injury, it doesn't matter if the helmet helping only 5% of the time. That's enough to protect your helmet. We will definitely do infrastructure. One thing this program has done and will continue to do over and over is even if infrastructure is the number one thing we can do, we're going to get 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 simultaneously because all of them add up. And if this is only going to make a 1% difference, this is a 2% difference, this is a 5. If they're additive, you've made a much bigger difference. So we'll do infrastructure and we'll do other things at the same time.
Hey, Nicole. I got a couple points to make. First, I guess my question is, when is bike infrastructure going to be part of all the street planning instead of, you got to wait for the punch list to put on the Shero 11 months after the painting has been done on the rest of the road and things like that. It's always coming after. So that's one part of my question. And the other part is, I'd sort of like to challenge you a little on your equity. You know, you've done a lot of great efforts, right? And you got 600 people, but there's no hubway where they live. I don't see a hubway in my neighborhood, which is, in Dorchester, right? It'd be nice if you ramped up your plans a little faster. There's 120,000 people that live in that neighborhood, and I can show you at least a dozen hubway places that I drive by that if you drop the pin in the same spot around Dorchester, you'd have more people would probably use them, especially if you're subsidizing your things like that. So, I'm agreeing with you guys on the equity thing. I see them out trying to do their thing. You're trying to teach people to ride bikes, but, Dorchester Avenue, there's like a half a mile stretch of it where it's wide enough that had lanes, but you just put sharrows in. So you didn't do the maximum thing that you can in that part. And that's partly because, and then they installed 2 turn lanes in part of the whole redesign. A turn lane's really safe for bikes? I don't think so. Every time I get honked at at that intersection, somebody wanted to turn right while I'm waiting. So anyways, that's sort of my 2 points, and I hope I covered my other people that are asking about stuff. So thank you.
Lots of good points. Number one, for hubway expansion, I'm working on it as fast as possible. So far, we've raised $10 million. We thought we'd only raise $5 million. That's what's getting us to this point, and we keep raising more money. And as we raise, I think you saw the chart of how we can expand. I think Steve Miller showed a fantastic chart. We need to keep density, so what we can't have is an island of a station in the southern tip of Hyde Park with nothing connecting to it, which is why we try to raise money as fast as we can. In terms of infrastructure, we push and we push, but when we go into a meeting, it's not just cyclists, and it would be fantastic if it were. But we get from other people, we need the turn lanes, and other people don't take my parking, and we're always trying to find a balance. I think you generally take a fairly aggressive balance. The one thing everyone in this room can do to help us is if there's a public meeting anywhere in your neighborhood, particularly a neighborhood where there is not a great cycling culture, so outside of JP, outside of Austin, Brighton, get to that public meeting because we need more voices there that are saying it's okay to remove that travel lane, it's okay to remove the turn lane, it's okay to remove parking, because we need the balance to push in our favor.
Hi, my name is Angela. I'm probably the only person here who has not rode on a bike in Boston yet. Where I come from, no one rides bikes because they really are afraid of getting killed. Yeah, guys, think Boston's bad, Texas. But I'm really excited about the Hellway expansion to JP because I really think this will be a kick in the pants for me because that's where I live and I go to Northeastern, I work in Northeastern, I mean, why not? But so I have a question about what metrics went behind choosing the proposed location. I mean, for one thing, Jackson Square was left out as a proposed location, and I think that aside from maybe Green Street and Jamaica Pond, that should have been the #1 chosen spot. I mean, it is a major hub for buses into Roxbury and Dorchester. It would link up along the Southwest Corridor Park, and it would also, right now it terminates at Roxbury Community College, which kind of forces people to either jump on the bus or, I mean, it just kind of makes sense to have Jackson there.
I'm sure Jackson Square will get a station as well. When you look at co-organizing, it was mostly an IT issue. We tried to make the circles as large as possible for where they are, but because they're circles and not squares, there's little areas that get left out. So put in Jackson Square, everyone else already has, and I'm sure it will have a station. We actually have to find a location there, but I'm not worried.
I just want to talk a little bit about the mayor's race that's coming up. Nicole and her team have done amazing work, and I just, we're going into a period of transition here, and I hope everybody's voting, and I hope everybody's paying attention to who's showing up to these meetings, like Mike Ross and Felix Arroyo, who are here tonight, and there's definitely other candidates that support bikes. But that sort of makes some of these things that we're looking at for the future a little unsure. Not every candidate out there supports bicycle infrastructure, and in particular, aggressive stuff like cycle tracks. So I wanted to ask, we have one cycle track that's going to be built this year, Mount Vernon, according to the presentation. But for the last 2 years, we've been talking about Malcolm X Boulevard, which I did see in Steve's presentation as part of the Dudley Square project, and I've been to those meetings, and that's part of that planning. So I see that's still living. But then we've been talking about one in the public garden, around the public garden, and I think, Chicago, New York, DC, all these cities have cycle tracks in their downtown urban core. And in 2010, we had a fatal crash at Beacon and Charles that might have been, we don't know, but might have been prevented by such a facility. I'm wondering, I didn't see it in the future plans this time. Where is that plan?
We definitely have a sketch of public garden and some conceptual design for the public garden. Very complex area. It's probably doable. It'll require a tremendous amount of public process to bring a road like a cycle track like public garden to fruition. Right now we're focused on Mount Vernon, Seaver Street, Harrison, and the Summer Street cycle track.
So, I'm sorry, could I just follow that up? Can I ask, is that public process beginning, if it's such a long public process soon?
We're looking at it internally and then deciding what our next steps are.
I just want to point out, I'm getting text messages that reminding me we have to be totally out of here by 8:30, which means we have to be moving by 8:20. So if we could not spend too long on the speeches and ask more of the questions so that everybody has a chance.
Hi, thank you. Jeffrey Ferris of Ferris Wheel Bike Shop in Grand Plain for 30 years. And I want to talk a little bit, I appreciate, thank you, a lot of things that you've been doing, the city's been doing. But I have some concerns that, looking at bike accommodations, you have on-street lanes, you have off-street paths, and now you have proposing cycle tracks. And I don't think any one of them is a panacea for bicycle safety. And none of them should just be called out, doing this and say, and that's not safe. The bike accident survey shows a lot of your accidents are at intersections. I don't remember the number, but I would guess the majority of accidents actually happen at intersections, not mid-block, which is where a cycle track gives protection. And you're looking at doing things at intersections, the bike blocks and such, which could be done for on-street lanes or cycle tracks. ASHTO guidelines do state that off-street bike accommodation does not preclude the need for good on-street accommodation. We do see that you didn't have it on your list here, but one of the high accident rate locations is the southwest quarter. It said Columbus and Cedar Street, and I'm presuming that means the southwest quarter path crossing Cedar Street. And that's where you have bikes crossing where cars don't expect it. So I want to bring this around to the Casey overpass in Jamaica Plain, which I'm sorry to see how the city has rolled over and supported what many people think is a travesty to that location. And the illusion that not building a bridge is not building infrastructure for cars, where you're putting 6 to 7 lanes in the ground for cars, and the road ends up being so wide that there's not enough room for bike lanes on the street, and there will be off-street paths. And if we've gone with the bridge, you'd have a narrow road, half the cars on the road, bike lanes on the street, bike paths on the side, and the sidewalk serving as a cycle track in the sky, skipping all those intersections below. And I hope it's not, it seems to be a foregone conclusion that this is the support. But I just want to say there are many, both cyclists and non-cyclists in Jamaica Plain that are very upset about this. And we hope that the city can take a second look at what the end result is. And if you're happy with a 7-lane road without the bike lanes on it. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Peter. I moved back to Boston in the last few years. I had actually served in the United States Army a few weeks after 9/11, and I actually came back to Boston in September 2011, so I was gone for exactly 10 years, for a decade. And after coming back, following infrastructure projects like the Big Dig, and all the work that's been done, with yourself and all of these bicycle advocacy groups in regards to really building up the bicycle infrastructure in Boston and bolstering for the support and awareness of everything. I've really, really come to be proud of being back in Boston. And actually, recently I had, over Christmas or whatever vacation, my girlfriend, who's from South Korea, came to visit me. And she was amazed at how awesome everything was in Boston, and specifically had pointed out the bicycle lanes and things like that. And now that it's the summer season and Hubway's in full swing, all these international tourists, they ride these bicycles, they see these bicycles everywhere, the Hubway and forward-thinking initiatives like the bicycle helmet vending machines, which to me is awesome. So I really feel like yourself and everybody else, Mayor Menino, have really done their best to put Boston's best foot forward to the city, to the country, and to the world. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
My question, 3 hours later, I know we gotta get moving here, is more in regards to bicycle parking and just seeing whether there's anything out there in regards to like more long-term bicycle parking. Because I know over at the T stations, there's been a lot of work in the last few years. You have the pedal and park stations at South Station. You have one at Back Bay. You have one at Alewife, Forest Hills, a lot of these big hubs. Also, there's a lot of physical places where you can park your bike, throughout the city. But again, these are uncovered and not very secure, anything like that. And something that was amazing in Boston that I saw, that I didn't even know about until coming back, was like in Boston Commons, we have all this underground parking for cars, which is great. And in the past, I spent a little time in Japan and some other cities, and like say in Japan, on the on-ramps to some of the highways, they actually have bicycle parking, like long-term.
We got a question.
Sure.
There's 5 people past you.
Sure. So I guess what I'm asking is there anything that's in the works or anything, maybe in the future, private business, whatever, that would provide citizens of Boston any kind of long-term, something they could pay for, something similar to all these public parking garages that we have for cars, or what we have at Boston Commons for the cars underneath the park.
So covered secure parking is a priority. We know for visitors they want on street, but residents, commuters, they need covered secure parking. So number one, the city adopted very strict guidelines for new development that require a set number of covered secure parking for bicycles based on planned occupancy or square footage. Number two, Boston Common Garage actually is investigating the feasibility of doing a bike garage under there as part of their space and paying for that themselves. Number three, I'm very intrigued by New York City's law requiring all businesses, all buildings that have a freight elevator to allow bikes in the building. That is the most cost-efficient way to provide everyone in every building pretty much covered secure parking. So I want to look at that as well. But yes, we definitely know that it's an important issue. Ethan.
How's it going? I'm Ethan Fleming. As one of the winners of the Bike Citizen of the Year award last year, I decided to continue some things. This year, I just want to let my fellow cyclists know some stuff that I found out. I've been doing a lot of talking to non-cyclists about how cyclists affect them and stuff, and using that as a way to try to make things easier. I just played this couple-week-long game of phone tag between the mayor's hotline, the police stations, and the parking authority, because I've noticed the parking authority is constantly saying, well, bike lane parking tickets are the police's issue, not us, and vice versa is going on. So as a result of these long meetings, I now this Friday have a meeting with Sergeant Provenzano of District 4, I think his name is pronounced. As we talked briefly on the phone, he has informed me that they do know the areas where bike lane parking is an issue, but they're having a lot of difficulty finding out what time of day it is. So one thing I want to help him with is, can everyone please inform the police about times of day and try to keep an eye out for that as well. One more thing that I'm actually going to be working on this summer is I have an idea. As you know, Josh Zissin, who unfortunately just left a while ago, gives out these cards for in case you have a bike accident, which I hope none of you ever have to use. I'm actually going to be working on, because I've seen car insurance companies have this app to fill out information for accidents, and I'm actually going to be working on a bicycle accident app for phones this year. It's just in the sketch design phase right now. So I'm going to, when I get graphic ideas sketched put together, I will post them on Facebook, and I'm just asking for everyone to give me their feedback on that.
sergeant's home phone number that you could give him?
I wish.
I'm sure he does too.
Cool, so I'm Noelle Janko, formerly president of the board of the Boston Cyclist Union. Nicole, thank you for being awesome. I really appreciate it. So something that I really care about is getting more ladies on bicycles, and I know that ladies have a higher standard of safety, so more infrastructure will help, but I'm wondering what other plans you might have for getting more of us on the road.
It's a great question. I don't know what the best thing is. I went this year to the League of American Bicyclists Women's Cycling Forum to get some ideas. I think I have some, but I don't know what's going to maximize the impact. It's something we do want to address. Anytime we put in a program, you really want to look at all the different options and say, boom, this one is probably going to have the most impact. I don't know yet, but I'll work on it.
There are a couple of roads I'm curious if there's any plans for. If you're in Quincy or Dorchester, a road that if you were very brave you would take is Morrissey Boulevard. It could be a great cycling throughway for Quincy. We had a guy killed there this year, and it seems like it's a deprecated boulevard because I-93 runs parallel to it, and there's so much space relative. It's a very low density road. I'm wondering if you could just demolish and make a cycle track or something. The other road, and I'm curious about is, anybody who's going from like the public garden area to Cambridge, I'm not sure what the rest of the people do, but I just break the law like all the time. Charles Street, the wrong direction. I mean, otherwise I gotta go over Beacon Hill, around down, it's ridiculous. So I go the wrong way. Is there anything that can be done about either of those?
Morrissey, Freeport area, that definitely needs some work on it. It's actually a state road, Department of Conservation and Recreation, so we have to work with them. When we put together a bike network plan, we did look at that, and we will have suggestions for it, and we can work with them to try to get those in. Charles Street, we've looked at, and as part of the network plan, we think long-term it definitely does need two-way cycle tracks. I had a poor intern that could count cyclists going the wrong way on that. At any point, about 30% of the cyclists were biking the wrong direction. And that is an example of a design feature. Cyclists clearly are trying to get to the Longfellow Bridge and to Cambridge.
Just on that piece with the Morrissey, one of the projects we're going to be trying to do as part of the Green Routes effort is to convert some of these very wide old parkways into multimodal routes with having either protected or bike lanes or cycle tracks or paths alongside of them. And that'll be something that we're going to need a lot of public support to make happen.
Morrissey's clearly up in the air. Any idea on the timing for Charles Street?
I don't know, that's a significant public process issue. It's also a significant road for bicyclists. That's a big community change.
Yeah, I want to make a comment about Morrissey. What's going to happen, there's a section of, as people from Dorchester know, there's a section of the Ponce Greenway which is going to parallel Morrissey, goes next to the gas tank, on the other side of the expressway, comes in just past the expressway on-ramp, and crosses the bridge, but then there'll be a continuing path up to connect to the paths around Columbia Point. The problem with it is money and a will from the state. It's part, like it's part of this 13-mile-long bike path. 6 miles have been built. There are 4 sections that are waiting for money to get built. That's one of them. There's a lot of demand for it, but somehow we can't get the money out. And I think, I'm not really sure what it will take at this point, but it's a big issue, and I think the best thing to do really is to talk to your state reps and state senators and get them to know that it's an issue for you. Because often with these kind of things, it's only the people, only the representatives whose district it's in that are involved, but anybody who uses it from other places, when these are thoroughfares, we need to get other people involved in this. It's been a hard thing. I've been working on it for 25 years, and we've got some done, but it's really slow, and it needs to be faster. This is the biggest problem with the state, is getting off-road facilities built in any kind of a reasonable time. It shouldn't take half a lifetime to do it.
Jessica received the Lifetime Advocate Award last year for tireless work for 27 years. And I promise you the next 27 years it will be faster. I'm glad it's sitting out a little bit because this way I can share my birthday cake with everyone.
Hi, my name is Q.
I have a question about demographics.
Yep.
And I missed the early part of the presentation, so please forgive me if you've covered this. Specifically about the group of people who do not ride or almost never ride. And we can assume that there are some folks that will never ever ride for various reasons. And yet there may be groups out there, well, we know there are groups out there, right on the cusp. And I'm wondering what demographic information we currently have, either from this region or from the country or elsewhere in the world, that gives us information as to who those people are and what are the things that they would need or like to see in order to participate in cycling in an urban space.
The best research is actually coming out of Portland, and a few years ago they came up with a spectrum to classify people, and they said 1% of people are fearless and they're going to bike whether or not there's bike lanes. And then they said there's 7% of the population that's confident and enthusiastic. And these are the people that put in a bike lane and they will bike, and they're not worried that it's mostly just pain. And then they said there's 30% of the population that's curious and interested but concerned. And these are the people that we're not going to capture right now, that aren't biking right now. They need protected facilities and cycle tracks to get them on ride. And then there's 50% of the population, my math just didn't add up, sorry about that. No way, no how, they are not going to ride. I put my father in that category. He'll never ride, we don't worry about him. But anyway, Portland came out with this theory, and now they're actually going back and saying, are these numbers correct? And indeed they are. So it gets back to marrying the perceived fear and perceived safety with real safety and real fear, which gets to ever more protection to get down that spectrum.
And we think we know what the steps are that need to happen to get that 30% into the upper bracket.
Exactly, yeah. You know, coming from the worst cycling city in the country where we were, and one thing we're doing is accelerating everything and leapfrogging a little bit. Copenhagen took 30 years to get where they are today, which is their 30% load share. And yes, we're adding bike lanes, we're adding share lane markings, but we're trying to jump ahead a little bit, but we still need all of these other features. So it's a little bit of everything.
I was just wondering about, I think it would be cheaper even than paint to have the lights timed so that they're favorable for bicyclists rather than cars. I think cars might pay us even more. I was wondering about that.
I don't know the cost of timing lights, the political cost of doing that. I do have a good sense of. Timing is an interesting point because you're going two ways on the street anyway. So if you time, and they talk about this with cars, if you time it to go inbound, cars that are going outbound at that exact same time, it doesn't work for. And a lot of the streets are really two-way streets that neither inbound or outbound rush hour. It's not necessarily impossible to time it both for cars and for bikes because
I was thinking for bikes.
No, but it's not impossible to do both because if you're timing it for, say, 25 miles an hour for a car, which is roughly the speed limit, that's 12 and a half miles, which is pretty much the average bike speed limit that cyclists are going. 25 and 12 and a half are identical in terms of light timing.
I don't get that.
If you time things for 25 miles an hour on light and you're going far enough, it's just twice as long by bike.
Okay, so you're getting every other light?
Not necessarily.
That's not how it feels.
No, you won't need any one. Because literally you'll pass it in the next light.
They don't work that much.
Actually, the streets in New York or in Copenhagen that do the green wave, in New York they do it for cars. I grew up where you could keep going at 20-something odd miles an hour and you would just go all the way up. Those are all one-way streets. I mean, that's the issue here. So to make a green wave or a car wave work, you actually need a one-way boulevard or half of a big street that is separable. So that's part of the complication.
Okay, well, thank you.
Hi, Nicole. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And great job last week with Bike Week, by the way. My name is James Bacchus. I'm here with Boston Collective Delivery. We're a worker-owners running cooperative bicycle messenger service. And I just wanted to ask Nicole, what is the city doing to reach out to the working messenger community to inform the infrastructure and type of behavior and patterns that we see throughout the day as we work?
Great question, nothing yet, so give me a call and I'll have to talk about it.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that, as well as our...
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. I just got the text. It's 8:20, and we have about a minute to vacate. So I want to, you can finish, but it's going to be really, really, really quick. And the rest of you, I just want to say thank you for coming. I'm sure that people could stick around outside and ask Nicole additional questions. Thank you for coming, and this has been really good. All the comments here go to the city.
Yes, considering the fact that the only two professions on bicycles include cyclists and bike messengers, I think it's important that we are part of the conversation, that you're not just focusing on commuters, you're not just focusing on casual riders, young people, old people, but that we actually are included in the conversation on where bike lanes go in and what our experience is as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, I would love your help, I agree.